Did Project Sigil really just get worse, or has there been a lot of clickbait surrounding it? I want to offer up an alternative to the vitriol and the way off in left field assumptions and simply say that Project Sigil's struggles might really be just a blessing in disguise. GameMasters here, and I want to state this right off the bat. Project Sigil isn't being shut down. It isn't being canceled. It's not dead on arrival or any of the other clickbaity things that folks and other videos are claiming. Is it going through a transition? Yeah, you bet. Is it seeing its overall vision getting altered? Yes it is. I want to also state that today's video takes into account that Sigil's landscape is changing. But let's go ahead and put this all into context. The recent shakeup at Wizards of the Coast, specifically the layoffs that gutted the Project Sigil team, has been met with frustration from many in the Dungeons & Dragons community. While some fans lament the loss of what could have been a revolutionary VTT, I want to point out why this might actually be for the best, at least from a business standpoint. If Project Sigil had been released as a fully monetized platform, one where players had to purchase access, buy the virtual miniatures, and other visual assets, such as the different animations for spells, other things that had been kind of hinted at and teased at, it could have become a financial pitfall for many D&D fans. Imagine a scenario where players spent hundreds of dollars on digital content, only for Wizards of the Coast to later decide that the project wasn't sustainable and shut it down. Unlike physical books and miniatures, digital assets purchased in a proprietary system, they become worthless if that system ceases to exist and you can no longer access it. Instead, the decision to scale back before Sigil became a paid product means that players haven't sunk real money into a potentially doomed platform. This is a significantly better outcome than what could have happened had Wizards pushed Sigil aggressively as a premium product, only to later abandon it after profiting off of all of the early adopters. Then you have the project team that was working on Project Sigil. There's no sugarcoating this. There's no sugarcoating the fact that it absolutely sucks balls that 90% of the Project Sigil team was laid off. These developers poured their time, energy, and creativity into making something truly ambitious, only to have the rug pulled out from under them. I'm never, ever going to fully understand how someone can fart at 2 a.m. and wake themselves up with what they felt was a grand idea and then tell their subordinates just to make it happen, when instead what they really should have done is just wiped their ass and go back to sleep. But this, sadly, is what happened. And this is yet another frustrating example of how quickly big companies can discard the very people who bring their projects to life. But there is a silver lining of Project Sigil's downsizing. It leaves the virtual tabletop market largely unchanged. Established virtual tabletop platforms like Roll20, Foundry, Fantasy Grounds continue to operate without an aggressive push from Wizards attempting to dominate that space. If Sigil had succeeded in monopolizing the D&D VTT experience, monopolizing might be a harsh word, but if they got big, those platforms might have struggled to compete, may have seen their customer base leave and move to Sigil, all the while attempting to renovate their own programs, but would have ultimately seen the rug pulled out from under them once Wizards cut Sigil support. Now, these alternatives continue to remain viable, and players still have access to platforms that that have been developed and refined over, in some cases, many years. Wizards of the Coast's decision to keep Sigil as a D&D Beyond feature rather than a full-fledged standalone product could be a good move in the long run. It allows them to gradually integrate digital tools without forcing an abrupt and possibly flawed transition. It gives them an opportunity to course correct. This also provides time for them to reassess what you and I actually want from a VTT, rather than pushing an Unreal Engine powered system that, honestly, it's visually impressive, but it just lacked the essential features upon launch. Consider this. Had Sigil fully launched with paid content and microtransactions, its sudden restructuring and layoff of 90% of the Sigil team would have been a much, much bigger public relations disaster for Wizards of the Coast. The backlash from customers who had financially invested in the platform would have been immense. By pulling back before they did a full rollout, they've avoided a scenario where players are left with useless purchases and broken promises. I've been very vocal in the past about why I dislike digital. I'm not a fan, and it's simply because of this very reason. Imagine how pissed you would be if you had spent your cash on dozens, if not hundreds, of virtual minis, virtual terrain, whatever other microtransaction assets that they were dreaming up, only to have it all taken away because they decided to transition the VTT into D&D Beyond. Who knows if the restructuring of the scope of the Project Sigil would even allow you to continue to use those assets. By extension, I'm also very leery of D&D Beyond's virtual books, but honestly, that's a video for another time. Ultimately, the fate of Project Sigil remains uncertain, but this setback doesn't mean the end of digital D&D. The push towards online play, listen, it's inevitable, but this course correction gives Wizards a chance to do it right, at least how they define what right is. Whether that means refining Sigil as a tool within D&D Beyond or focusing on partnerships with existing VTTs, well, that kind of remains to be seen. If, however, digital tools and VTTs are your go-to and you are a fan of them, the best thing that you and your players can do is to continue using the digital tools that work best for you and your table. Project Sigil's near miss with full monetization should serve as a reminder that sometimes a failed launch is far better than a disastrous success. What do you think about Project Sigil's fate? Was this a necessary course correction, or would you have rather seen it develop further and possibly take the risk of losing all of the money that you sunk into it? Something to ponder about, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you're enjoying this discussion, don't forget to give the video a mighty thumbs up. Until next our paths cross, may you not lose anything digital that you've invested in.